Let me tell you, what I'm about to share isn't just a simple camping accident. No, this is a record of the most gruesome nightmare a human can face, a scene straight out of hell. This is about the Fukuoka University Wander Vogel Club brown bear attack incident, which happened from July 25th to 29th, 1970, in the Hidaka mountains of Hokkaido, Japan. Just hearing that name sends a chill down my spine, doesn't it? This tragedy, a bloody catastrophe born from human helplessness and nature's brutality, showed us just how fragile we are and how merciless nature's wrath can be. A pitch-black night, with the heavy scent of damp earth and grass hanging in the mountain air. You finally drifted off to sleep, only to suddenly hear the sharp, tearing sound of tent fabric right above your head. And through that rip, a gigantic beast's shadow looms ominously, its rough breathing and pungent wild scent filling the tent. It's hard to believe, I know, but that's exactly what happened that night, deep in the Hidaka mountains of Hokkaido. A raw, brutal reality. In the summer of 1970, 5 young members of the Fukuoka University Wander Vogel Club, leader Kazutoshi Takesue, Shunji Taki, Morio Kurogi, Yoshiharu Nishi, and the youngest, Yoshitaka Kawahara, had escaped the suffocating city life, seeking freedom in the great outdoors. On July 25th, they set up camp in a place called Kunuzawa Karu, in the upper reaches of the Sanai River, a place I never want to remember. They built their own paradise. The campfire blazed, and they probably played guitars and sang songs. They must have been laughing and sharing stories under a sky full of stars. It honestly pains my heart to imagine the innocent smiles on their faces. They had no idea then that they had stepped into the domain of the Ezo brown bear, a place where death's shadow already loomed. The terror began on that very first night. Not long after setting up camp, strange rustling sounds started. They probably thought it was just a small animal, but soon a huge shape circling their tent appeared, and at that moment, their hearts must have frozen. It was a bear. Like a crazed, hungry beast, it began rummaging through the students' belongings. The smell of food must have drawn it in. When the students, startled, banged pots and shouted, the bear seemed to retreat for a moment. I can almost see the relief on their faces then, thinking, that's enough. It's gone. But that was a mistake, a fatal overconfidence. The bear didn't just retreat, it came back with even greater fury and boldness. In the middle of the night, it reappeared, relentlessly tearing a huge hole in their tent. Can you even imagine that? How would you feel? Doesn't it send shivers down your spine? In the pitch-black darkness, the rough tearing sound of the fabric and the beast's heavy breathing pierced their ears. The cold night air, the smell of bear fur, the musty scent of the forest, and that suffocating, repulsive animal odor all filled the tent. Terror instantly overwhelmed them, and they had to play the radio all night, taking 2-hour shifts, keeping watch, trembling with fear. They couldn't relax for a single moment. Terrified, the bear might burst into the tent again and tear their flesh. How long that night must have felt, gripped by cold, hunger, and the fear of an ever-present death. I think at that moment, they must have instinctively felt, this is hell, we have to get out now. But tragically they couldn't. Their lack of experience and a vague optimism, surely we won't die, ultimately became the first fatal blade threatening their lives. The next morning dawned. For them, tormented by extreme fear, the morning sun might have felt like a fleeting hope. But that hope was short-lived. Before the morning was even over, that nightmare of a brown bear reappeared. This time, it was even more blatant, more threatening, as if to declare this was its territory and it would never forgive intruders. It violently knocked over their tent, pushing their fear to the absolute limit. Takesu's judgment, under those circumstances, might have been the best he could do. But as a result, it was the beginning of the tragedy. The bear's repeated aggression was not just a temporary threat. Despite clear signs that it was persistent, their decision to stay at the camp was incredibly dangerous and ultimately fatal. Around noon, the 5 students reunited. Though brief, they might have felt some relief and comfort in each other's presence. They set up the fallen tent, shared their remaining food, and incredibly, there's even a record that they took a short nap. It's hard to believe, isn't it? Were they so physically and mentally exhausted? Or were their senses so numb that they couldn't even accept the reality of the situation? This part of the story is still one of the most talked about. The question of why still lingers decades later. Why did they, consumed by fear, fix their tent, eat, and even sleep? Some analyze it as a human psychological coping mechanism under extreme stress, a denial of reality. I agree with that explanation, but at the same time, thinking about how dangerous their choice was and the agonizing consequences it brought fills me with both anger and deep sorrow. Their belief that bears can't reach us on the ridge was, in fact, baseless optimism. The bear had already appeared right in front of them, tearing tents, rummaging through their belongings and repeatedly showing itself, yet they remained trapped in the illusion that here is safe. This wasn't just a simple mistake, it was a moment where their survival instincts failed. That choice ultimately pushed them deeper into despair. The bear wasn't just an animal. Its eyes held a certain madness and murderous intent, and it seemed to view them not as mere intruders, but as beings to be eliminated. And that madness, it never stopped. Around 4 p.m., they couldn't believe their eyes again. While they were resting after their meal, that gigantic brown bear, once more, appeared before them without hesitation. It was a menacing stance, as if to say, there was no longer any place to run, no place to hide. They must have instinctively known this wasn't just a threat, this was a hunt. Terrified, the 5 scattered, trying to group together and flee towards the Tottori University camp. But that area was already deserted. The other camps had heard about the bear threat and had all evacuated. With nowhere to turn, they had no choice but to run through the forest in the dark night. Can you imagine it? The sun setting, visibility fading, and the mountain growing eerily quiet. In that hushed forest, only their footsteps and the panting of the beast pursuing them echoed. Their footing would have been slippery, branches whipping their faces, shoes heavy and soaked. One step, then another. They were in a desperate race against death. And then, the tragedy began. The bear was a hunter, and they were its prey. The first to fall was the youngest, Yoshitaka Kawahara. The bear, with an animal's keen senses, tracked him, then lunged and subdued him in an instant. His scream echoing through the forest must have sounded like the world was tearing apart. A cry that would forever haunt the hearts of his remaining friends. The bear mainly focused its attack on the buttocks and anal area. A cruel and calculated attack. Its purpose was to incapacitate him, prevent escape, and make him bleed helplessly. Flesh being torn, bones exposed, screams piercing the air. At that moment, that was no longer nature. That was hell. Consumed by terror, the remaining 4 scattered, losing all sense of direction. They abandoned each other to survive. Leader Takasue, Kurogi, Taki, Nishi all ran in different directions, desperately navigating the forest with the beast's shadow clinging to them. They knew falling meant the end. Without time to look back or strength to cry out, they struggled through the forest, each battling their own terror. That forest was no longer beautiful nature. It had become a vast slaughterhouse, with death gaping wide. On the early morning of July 27th, the sun, breaking through the darkness and fear, illuminated not hope, but deeper despair. Among those scattered that night, Morio Kurogi used his last ounce of strength to write in his notebook. I couldn't tell what was happening below. Only the sound of the bear could be heard. There's nothing else to do. So tonight, here. This sentence is a record of despair that continued right up to the moment his life was extinguished. His body was found on a hillside, 3 kilometers upstream from the Sanai River. His face and neck horribly disfigured. The bear must have circled him all night, finally consuming him. Kurogi's hand, trying to leave a final testament of his survival, couldn't fight off the bear's attack or write any further. The desperation contained in that short sentence speaks more powerfully than any dialogue, revealing the true brutality of nature. Just reading it sends shivers down my spine, a chilling echo of despair. Despite that, on the same morning, amidst the thick fog in the forest, the leader, Kazutoshi Takasue, also collapsed shortly after being attacked by the bear. His body was found about 500 meters from Kurogi's, also severely mutilated. His final choice, as a leader trying to protect his friends, was helplessly crushed by the absolute power of the bear. The death of these two wasn't just a sacrifice. It was the moment when a leader's pure will and a comrade's loyalty crumbled before the violence of nature. The forest, where 2 young lives vanished, symbolized human powerlessness more intensely than any description could convey. I feel immense pain every time I think about this incident, thinking of the suffering and despair these young people endured, and the grief of their families brings tears to my eyes. However, even in that nightmare, a miracle existed. Shunji Taki and Yoshiharu Nishi desperately fled from death's shadow. They ran for days and nights, starving, trembling with fear, never stopping for a single moment. And finally, they reached the dam construction site and managed to call for help. If it weren't for their desperate escape, this incident might have remained forever lost in the mountains without a trace. But because they survived, we can remember this tragedy. Along with the joy of surviving, the guilt and trauma of having to abandon their friends must have weighed on their souls for the rest of their lives. This proves that sometimes survival itself can be a form of suffering. I can't even begin to fathom how they managed to live normal lives. The trauma they experienced must have been as profound as the suffering of those who died. On the night of July 27th, after receiving the rescue call, the Obihiro Police Station and the Tokachi Mountain Federation immediately formed a search party, and on July 28th, a full-scale search began. The very next day, July 29th, the notorious brown bear was finally located. 10 experienced hunters unleashed a volley of rifle shots, and the massive 200-kilogram male brown bear was killed on the spot. Hearing the news that the bear had fallen to the shots brought a strange, bitter relief, along with a lingering question. Why didn't this bear stop in the face of humans? Was it just hunger? Generally, wild bears instinctively avoid humans. But this bear was different. It was brutally, relentlessly tearing tents and pursuing people. Some experts said, this bear was an individual with a learned aggressiveness, one that didn't fear humans. In other words, it wasn't just a wild animal, It was a being driven by an instinct to defend its territory and punish those who trespassed. That incident shocked all of Japanese society. Peaceful, romantic mountaineering and camping instantly transformed into objects of fear and caution. As a result, access to bear-infested areas was restricted, and camp safety regulations were completely overhauled. Even the citizens of Sapporo finally realized that the mountains are the realm of the wild. Taki and Nishi later refused media interviews and vanished without a trace, but those around them suspected they never returned to normal lives. The trauma of having to carry the faces and screams of their lost friends forever, rather than just the fact of their survival, must have remained with them. This incident wasn't just an accident. It was a tragic experiment that relentlessly showed how fragile and easily human beings can crumble in nature, and what responsibility and helplessness they must bear in the face of that collapse. And the result of that experiment was too horrific. Nature was never benevolent to humans. This incident was a warning, etched in blood, of that very fact. The bear was killed. But that wasn't the end. The immediate autopsy results defied everyone's expectations. No human tissue or personal belongings of the students were found in the bear's stomach. The premise we had believed, that the bear attacked humans out of starvation, was completely shattered. This wasn't just a hunt for food. The bear wasn't trying to eat people. It was trying to eliminate them. Why? The bear, which appeared around the camp multiple times, was reportedly drawn by the smell of food. But it didn't steal food and flee. Instead, it relentlessly attacked the people. It was as if it possessed an instinct to eliminate threats that invaded its territory, or perhaps a pathological obsession with repeatedly encountering humans. We have to ask, was the bear trying to eat humans or merely trying to eliminate them? Perhaps the bear that day perceived humans not as prey, but as a muck enemy. Just as we might indiscriminately subdue intruders, the bear might have instinctively decided that humans entering its territory were beings to be annihilated. This wasn't just an accident. This was madness. It was the sharpest warning nature ever sent to humanity. And 3 young lives had to pay the price for that warning.